All right, welcome back, folks. This is going to be a playthrough of the first operation in Regiments. Now, Regiments is a Cold War single-player RTS. There's no multiplayer, and the dev is not interested in doing multiplayer. I think what he said was that in the event that he makes a sequel, that will probably have multiplayer, but highly unlikely. Not happening anytime soon, that's for sure. But it's a Cold War 1980s. What we're doing is the first operation. So if we we look here, these are all the operations, which is basically the mainline campaign. I've not played the DLC ones. I've never touched them before. But what we're doing is that we're gonna play through the first one. Now, I've played through this game. As you can see, I've pretty much beat all the levels except for the last two on the master difficulty. I think it's around about this point that I lost interest in the game. But yeah, I about a year ago when I first got the game. Actually, no, it's 2 years now. When I first got the game, I played the absolute crap out of it. I really enjoyed it. It was quite a fun, light RTS, and because it's only single player and the game gives you a lot of options to change the game itself. You know, you can add more time, you can increase lethality of your weapons, you can increase accuracy, suppression. You can manipulate the game mechanics, which not a lot of games allow you to do at like this kind of a base level, but that's available to you in this game. But for this playthrough, this playthrough, I'm not gonna bother with any of the advanced rules. I'm gonna keep it as they are on the base level, and the only thing I'm gonna be changing is the difficulty to the master level and play it through there. So for this operation, we're playing as the East Germans, I believe. They're basically, for all intents and purposes of the gameplay, we're the Soviets. All of our weapons, tanks, all that stuff, it's all Soviet weaponry. We have 3 stages, which is basically like three missions, and each mission has a certain amount of phases that are allocated to you to complete the mission, which is interesting because in like most campaign single player games, you're only given like one attempt at whatever the mission objectives are. In this game, they give you quite a few. In some campaign operations, they only give you one phase, but those are like rare, and it still provides a strategic level to the whole campaign that you won't find very common in most RTS games. So that's what we're working here. So we're going to be playing through stage one, and we're given 2 phases to complete stage one. And that's what we're going to do for this video here. So let's get in here. Okay, so this here is the regiment page. So we have the operational authority, which is basically your cash. This is your money. We're given 50. Now, the differences between the difficulties is not only the amount of enemy units that are going to be present in the missions, but also the OA that you're given, all the cash. We're given only 50, which is basically next to nothing. The way usually that I measure it is if we want to bring in any more reinforcements straight off the bat on the first mission, we can't bring any. We're just not allowed due to the restrictions on the points. These here are the reinforcements that we are allowed to bring in this campaign. I'll walk over them later. But yeah, this is how much cash we have, and it's not a lot. For this first mission, the important thing is to get more operational authority, because if we don't get enough OA, we can't replenish our losses, and if we don't replenish our losses in time for the second stage, we're going to be in a very tough situation. So it's important that we play this first mission properly. And if we do that, the second and third missions are just cakewalks. They're extremely easy to get through. It's just this first one here that we can't afford to screw up. Quite similar to one of my playthroughs on another game called the Battle for West North. In certain campaigns, if you don't achieve the mission objectives, if you don't get the kind of resources that you need early on in the campaign, then you get screwed. So there's that kind of level of strategic gameplay that goes on in this game. So, okay, I'll just walk through what it is that is available to us and how we're going to play through this whole campaign and how we're going to go through the first stage as well. So we have a very even balance combined arms, mixed combined arms regiment at our disposal. So we have a recon unit here, which is basically just an armored car with machine guns. They're not going to be doing anything special except just pure reconnaissance for us, because we can't depend on them to do anything else other than that. There are other recon units available which do have a lot more powerful weapons and have more versatility, but we're not going to be seeing them throughout this campaign here today. We have 2 platoons of T-72 M1s. Now, these tanks, they're not good, but they're not bad either, right? The way we want to use them is for engaging enemy infantry and enemy tanks at medium ranges. They have a decent amount of range to hit at longer ranges, and we will be utilizing that. But because of their kind of like average armor, we want to keep them far away from close quarter engagements, especially with enemy infantry, because they can't take too much hits, especially in a prolonged engagement as well. They don't do too well. So we have 2 platoons of T-72s. We have 2 platoons of riflemen coming in BTRs. Now, one of them has increased anti-tank capabilities. Both platoons have AT weapons. They have here, if you look at the bottom right corner of the screen as I hover over, they both have RPG-7s. And they're pretty good so long as you can get to the side and quite close to enemy armor. They can deal with enemy armor pretty alright, so long as you can do that. But with the AT variant here, we have 2 recoilless rifles, so they have increased range for anti-tank capabilities. So we have 2 platoons of infantry, mechanized infantry. We have here a mechanized mortar platoon. These are really useful, 120mm mortars. Now, the way that it works in the base mechanics of the game is that artillery and mortars, they are more of a suppression type kind of unit. You don't really depend on them to do tons of damage, especially the enemy infantry. Not saying that they can't do lots of damage to infantry or light armor. They can get kills, but the way it's been designed is more as a support unit to suppress the enemy. And a suppressed enemy can't maneuver very well. They have decreased accuracy, slower rate of fire, that sort of stuff. So yeah, more of a support unit. We also have a platoon of these. I'm not entirely sure what you classify them. My knowledge on all of the Cold War weaponry isn't that good, but this is our anti-air unit, basically tracked anti-air. Now, the Shilker doesn't really come into play for the most part in this campaign because the enemy doesn't actually deploy any real air assets that we have to contend with. This campaign, basically, for the lore side that the developer wrote it, this is a skirmish between the East Germans and the West Germans. Most of all of the opponents that we're going to be fighting is all West German forces, or at least that's the way I think it was supposed to be. Come to think of it, I think it's rebels, not West Germans. Sorry, because most of the enemy units that we're going to be fighting are quite similar to us. They have all Soviet weaponry as well. May be a slightly mistaken, but that's the way that it came off towards me. But yeah, we won't really need to use this anti-air unit here. It's not going to become a very big factor in. We have a squadron, or should I say just a pair of Mi-24s. So this is our attack helicopters, gunships. They have machine guns, rockets, and ATGMs. Now, this is a very strong unit, just because of the ATGM. It's on a helicopter platform, so it can move around very fast, very quick. And the ATGMs are very strong, especially against armor. We can outrange most of the units that we're going to be facing with the ATGMs. The only problem is that the amount of ammo supplied to these attack helicopters is really low. So we're going to have to keep that in mind. And then, of course, to round off the regiment that we have commanding here is the logistics support. We have a platoon of supply trucks. We're going to be using them quite a lot in the first 2 missions here. Now, that's the force roster. along with the force roster are the tac aids or the tactical aids. These are like the special abilities, like spells. In the more traditional RTS world, that's what they would be called, the spells. So we have artillery, we have smoke artillery, and we have heavy artillery. Now this heavy artillery here is like really good, and we're going to be using a lot of it in this first stage here. Now the thing about the tac aids is that it runs on a separate economy, quite similar to how spells are in other RTS games. Instead of mana here, we have tactical points. And the way you can see how many you get is in this second bar right here, the tactical support. So by increasing this tactical support, we gain more tactical points to use the tactical aids. And yeah, that's its own separate economy that has nothing to do with the operational authority or the amount of supplies that deployment points we need to deploy our units into the field. What I mean by that is that the deployment points here is I know the font is quite small, but all of our units here have the deployment cost. So for the recon unit here, it costs 75 deployment points to put the platoon into the field. And the amount of points that we have available to us is put down here. We have 500 out of a maximum of 3,000. Now, how we get this 500 to the max is just by buying more deployment points with operational authority. What's very useful here is that the game tells you how many points overall you need to deploy everything in your regiment. And at this point in time, we don't have enough. We are short 225 points. So as we play through the first stage and especially the second stage, we're going to have to deploy our platoons strategically because we can't deploy everything. And the neat thing about this game is that it has a similar retreat mechanic to the Company of Heroes series. So basically, we can at any point in time retreat a unit, in which case they pop smoke and they move at max speed all the way back to our deployment zone. And when they retreat back to the deployment zone, we get the points back. There's a timer for them to refit, repair, and resupply. So we can't immediately deploy them again, so we have to wait a little bit. But we get the points back, and we also get them resupplied from whatever supplies that we have available to us to the regiment. So it's not like normal RTS games where the moment you lose a unit, that's it, it's dead. And all your veterancy is gone, and now you just need to buy a brand new unit and then put them back in the field. That's not exactly how it is. There's some Company of Heroes mechanics going on here along as well. It's the game itself is sort of like a in between of a war game like Red Dragon or Airland Battle and Company of Heroes. It's like a mix between those two. And of course, it's got its own unique stuff here that the game developer has implemented, which makes it quite a lot of fun. So yeah, that's the deployment point, tactical support of Discover. Okay, the supplies. The supplies is the in-game resources to give ammunition straight to the units here. So supplies can replenish ammunition, replenish durability for our tanks, but it does not give us extra units. All right, so you don't have like the gamey kind of mechanic where by healing a platoon by mitosis, another guy just pops out of nowhere because he's replenished or he's been healed, so-called air quotes there. That doesn't happen here. So if you lose a tank, but you have a supply truck next to it, you can repair the tank to durability up, repair its armor and whatnot, give it back ammunition, but you can't just bring another tank out of nowhere to replenish the whole platoon. That doesn't happen. So if we do want to avoid actual losing models in the game as we go through, especially in this first phase of this first stage, that's going to be very important. So, okay, I think I've covered most of the core mechanics and the force roster that we have available here. So the first decision that we're making is that we're going to use our 50 OA here straight into the tactical support. And the reason behind that is that because since we can't get any reinforcements, what we're doing is we're going to try and utilize the most out of our tactical aids, because the heavy artillery and the smoke are going to be coming in clutch throughout the entire campaign. and especially in this first phase here. So we're going to double down on that and utilize that to its maximum efficiency. Now that we're out of cash, we don't really have any other options, so we just got to take with what we've got and go into combat with that. So we have here a sort of like a board game kind of mechanic. If people play a lot of board war games or just board games in general, basically we have to pick one of these 4 cards here, which are generated every 4 phases. So after we've gone through all these cards, another 4 cards will be generated. And we get a mix of good stuff, bad stuff, and neutral stuff. The good stuff are the blue cards, bad stuff are red, and the neutral is the gray. So looking at what we've got here, um, usually very early on in the phases, I'll just start taking all of the negative modifiers. But in this case, this one is this one's a little bit kind of harsh, especially for the kind of strat that I want to play through the first phase. So I'm just going to pick the uneventful one. I usually save the good modifiers for later on in the phases in the campaign, because if we run into trouble that we didn't foresee or plan for, then these things usually help get us out of that rut. So yeah, we're going with uneventful, and yeah, we'll get into the battle itself. Okay. So here it is, the battlefield. So I'm just going to talk through what the strategy is that I'm going to go for here, how I'm going to play it out, and then I'll just, record the battle until we finish the phase. I won't be commentating in real time. So basically, I'm going to mute my mic and then I'm going to record and explain what's going on screen, because I can't really talk and play at the same time, and I don't really like doing that because most of the time it would just be me commentating what my cursor is doing, which you don't need me to tell you what my cursor is doing. You can really see that. So yeah, I'll just put a cut and then do audio commentary after that, after the whole video has been recorded, to just walk through all of the other details that were going on through my mind and how it played out, how I wanted it to play out. But yeah, for here though, I'm just gonna explain what the in-game situation is. So one thing that I see people not realize is that these points don't require you to have a line connecting to your deployment zone. So what I mean by that is that in other scenarios and missions, you usually have lines that connect all these tactical points, which means you have to capture them in sequence in order to get the zone, basically. But in this scenario here, you're not restricted to that at all. You can capture them in any order that you like, in any order that you want. So that's the first thing that I need to point out there. Now, objective-wise, all we need to do is hold these 2 zones here. And by holding these 2 zones, we get victory points. Oh, I forgot to explain what the victory points are in the overall campaign, how we win the campaign. A big oversight there. But basically, victory points is another currency, and this currency is separate to the deployment points, the authority, or the tactical points. These points here just influence the overall outcome that the game will give us at the very end of the campaign. In the next video, I will point to you out where the victory point counter is and explain a little bit more on how that works. But yeah, mission objective wise, we just have to make sure that these 2 zones are held until the end. And for every phase that we hold them, we get 25 points each, which is good, and we kind of need them. Now, the other thing about the other points is that they don't give us victory points, but they give us operational authority, which is the main currency. And at this point in time, it's what we really need, because we're really low. I mean, we're at 0 at this point, and we really need operational authority to replenish our forces moving on into the campaign. So you can see here that these 4 zones that are right in front of our deployment zone is right here. So yeah, our deployment zone is here into the south. Into the northeast is where the AI is deployed and is holding the 2 victory point conditions. And the rest of the zones in the middle is all the enemy, blue forces. They have 2 deployment zones, one here to the west and one here to the north. This is where their reinforcements will come in from. And so we need to capture these points which they are currently in control of. Now, as you can see, not all the points have the same amount of operational authority. So the way it works is once we capture this zone, and as long as we capture and hold it, after the phase is over, that's the amount of operational authority that we will get moving into the next phase. So we can spend that in buying more reinforcements, replenishing our losses, getting more good stuff, more deployment points, more tactical aids, that sort of stuff. So these 4 points here are worth 25 if we can capture and hold. And so is this one over here, way up in the northeast. These 2 points that are far forward are worth 50 points. So they're worth more. They're worth double of what these points are worth. And this final point all the way up here at the north side is worth 75. Now, on the lower difficulties, so easy, medium, and hard, it is possible to win this whole stage in the first phase, in this very phase that we're about to embark on. I, however, have not been able to achieve that on the master difficulty, and I haven't seen anybody else do it either. But if anybody has a recording that has already been posted somewhere, or have like an after-action report of them achieving the result, please comment it below, because I would like to see how it was done. But I personally don't have the skill enough to actually pull it off on this difficulty to get a phase 1 victory on stage 1. So what we're working on here is a 2-phase victory. We're going to take our time in this first phase. And what we're looking for here is to go for as much operational authority as we can, get as many points as possible in this first phase. Now, the way that I go about doing this is, instead of trying to go head on against these points here, which only have 25, what I do is that I go flank far west, right? Because this map is available to us to maneuver. It's a huge map. We have plenty of space to maneuver. What I do is that I go straight for the last point here, which is worth 75 OA. And after I cap that, I'm going to be going for these 3 points. Well, I haven't been able to get all 3, but these are the options depending on how the AI is going to play their cards. We're going to be attacking one of these 3 points here. Ideally, I would like to get these 250 OA points, and then that way we'd be completely set for the entire stage and pretty much the entire campaign at that point. But yeah, we're going to go far west, flank around, hit this northernmost point, and then swing around behind and try to capture one of these 2 points, or try if we can't get all these 3 as well. It's not the end of the world if we can't get all 3. In fact, it's okay even if we just get 1. But yeah, that's what we're going for. One thing to note is that all of the enemy forces, well, okay, there are 2 types of enemy forces. There are the entrenched enemy forces, which are randomly generated. So each of these points will have defensive units that are entrenched and are waiting for us, basically. And then there's a second type of enemy force, which is a mobile force, which has anti-air capabilities and recon units that move around the map and try to, mess things up. In this mission, those mobile forces are going to be trying to attack our AI defenses on this eastern end here. And throughout the phase, there will be mobile AI forces that are going to try and just straight up try to attack our forces, which are maneuvering on the battlefield. So those are the 2 kinds of forces that we have to contend with. Now, out of those 2 forces, the more important ones are the entrenched units. Those are the units that we want to kill, and we want to kill very early on, very quickly. The mobile forces are very easy to defeat. It's just the way that the AI is in this game. Don't ask me what the exact details are, but that's just the way it works out, at least in my experience. So our primary objectives here are to get as much OA as possible by trying to cap this northernmost point and one of these 2 points here, and trying to knock out as many of the entrenched units as possible along this flank here, and maybe even at Point Grove. And then after that, for the next phase, we'll be in a pretty good position. So I've like talked way too much and too long for this, so I'll just let the footage roll and future me commentate what goes on. Okay, so the force that we are deploying here is basically the recon unit, the 2 platoons of tanks, the 2 platoons of mechanized infantry, the mechanized mortars, and the supply trucks, the larger trucks. This is a self-contained combined arms unit. We're not bringing in the attack helicopters because they cost too much. We don't have enough deployment points, and we don't really need the anti-air. There's not going to be any enemy air assets. They're going to give us a lot of trouble. So I'm speeding up the time now to 2 times. The game has that built in. So if you look at the bottom of the minimap, there's the speed indicator, so you can adjust it. You can speed it up, slow it down. You also have a pause function, but I am not going to be using the pause function. That's just a personal preference for me, because that's the way I like to play the game. Adds a little bit more difficulty to it, I suppose. So yeah, so going over the force roster here, so we've got tanks, infantry, light artillery. We will be depending on the tactical aids, which you've already seen me call in the heavy artillery. Well, actually, not just yet, but in a few seconds I will be calling in the heavy artillery. We will be depending on the heavy artillery tactical aid a lot, because the off-map artillery is pretty good. It's very strong, much stronger than the 120 mortars that we have. So yeah, I'm about to call it in here. There you go. So we're going to be constantly using the heavy artillery to soften up all of the entrenched units that are going to be all over the places on all of the objective points. Now we run into some serious problems here. So there's always one entrenched unit defending the deployment zones on this side and one further north. And I accidentally sent my recon units straight into it. Usually they are entrenched further to the east, but this time they were entrenched further to the west, and they managed to actually spot my recon units as they approached. So they almost die, but I managed to keep them alive. They actually stay alive throughout the entire phase, basically. So I'm pulling him back into the supply zone to get him repaired and resupplied. But he's already spotted the mechanized infantry there, and now my tanks are in the tree line, having away at it, and the mortars are also suppressing, and the mortars do decent amount of damage to enemy infantry that are out in the open. So long as a mechanized infantry unit is deployed, the mortars will do quite a lot of damage to them. If they are mounted and embarked on their personnel carriers, then the mortar just does the suppression. It doesn't do much damage to them. So here we are, calling in the heavy artillery again, because like I said, it's a separate economy, the tactical aids. They're not dependent on anything else in the game, so you can be quite liberal with your use with the heavy artillery and any of the off-map abilities. There's just a cooldown to it, and there's also the replenishment rate of the tactical aid points, but other than that, you know, might as well use it because it's there. So we've dealt with that entrenched position. Now the main objective here is to get into the town, to get into that northernmost point. As long as our infantry can get into the town, then we're set. There's nothing that the enemy can do. Now the problem here with going as aggressive as this is, as you can see, sometimes the enemy reinforcements will spawn at these deployment points. Now usually in my experience they don't usually spawn at this southernmost point, but here we got unlucky, and these 2 units here, the anti-air unit and this platoon of tanks, they spawned in at this deployment zone, so we're getting slowed down here, and one of our tank platoons actually takes quite a lot of damage in this engagement. But we have them surrounded, we jumped them just as they spawned in, so we were going to win the battle regardless, this engagement, this small skirmish. But this whole phase is a time sensitive mission. we really want to get those points as fast as possible with the least amount of casualties. Because otherwise, going into the next phase and then the stage after that is going to cause us a lot of problems if we don't do it right. So yeah, we've taken quite a lot of damage and casualties to that tank platoon, but he's now being resupplied at the supply trucks. We're moving forward with the rest. We can't afford to wait on this one platoon. We have to make do with what we've got. So we're just taking a look there at how our friendly AI is doing against the enemy. So we're sending our recon unit and the tank platoon further south of the point into the tree line. The recon unit's gonna light up any targets that you can see. Now the problem is with the entrenched units that we're facing up against here, it's quite hard to detect them. Usually, and sometimes in my previous playthroughs, you can not detect an entrenched enemy position until you're right on top of them. So we have to be quite careful with how we maneuver our forces to the southern point here of Point NASA. So you can see here the recon unit has lit up this entrenched mechanized infantry platoon, and our tanks is just letting them have it. Now, our tank platoon is now receiving a lot of fire. That's a lot of ATGMs. But he's not receiving any hits because of the way the game mechanics work. So recon is like very, very powerful in identifying the unit markers. That tells you as the player how much accuracy your units are going to have in engaging that target. So here you can see the full icon, and if you hover over it with your cursor, you can actually see what the exact unit is, what its type, what kind of APCs they have, their weapons and all that. When you have all that information, it basically means that anytime any of your units engage them, they're going to have their maximum accuracy bonus. Well, not bonus, but they won't have a debuff to them, basically. Because sometimes if you have noticed here, it will just be a question mark on the unit icon, and that means it's not been verified or fully identified. And any of your units that shoot an enemy target that's not been fully identified, they get debuffs to them, their accuracy. So yeah, the recon is pretty important. So looking at this engagement here, our tank platoon is doing alright in not receiving any hits because the enemy can't actually see us. We're deep in the tree line, and he's only detected us because we started firing at him. So we have an advantage here. Now our infantry has already made it into the town. I've already dismounted them, and they're now pushing straight into the point. We've already called in heavy artillery support yet again, just constantly using that tactical aid. Get the suppression in, and of course the most important part about the heavy artillery, which makes it so good, is that it's actually very effective against enemy infantry and mechanized infantry. It gets quite a lot of kills, far more kills than our 120 mortars. So you've seen me use the smoke here and there. The smoke is only 5 tactical points, and the cooldown on it is also very quick. So if you're not using it, you're missing out basically. But yeah, we're just using it defensively here, just to cover our flanks as we cross into the open areas. And if we get shot at by targets which we can't see, we can't engage, we just smoke our way and then run away. The entrenched enemy units, they do not react. They always stay on the points and defend the points. It doesn't mean that they are always passive. I think if you wouldn't. It didn't show up here in this engagement, but later on you will see that the entrenched enemy units, if they are outflanked and taking tons of damage, they will unentrench themselves and turn to face whatever threat is engaging them. You will see that later on in this phase. But for now, we've cleared out that point, we've captured it, and I'm making my way with the infantry to the southern fields here of that point, because usually there's a lot more units that are entrenched in that field, and it's light cover terrain. I'm not entirely sure what kind of terrain you would call it, geographically speaking, but the territory which they're moving through right now is basically light cover of some kind. It's like a sort of mini hedgerow. And usually there's a lot of units that are entrenched there, but we got really lucky with our rolls here regarding the enemy placement. There was barely anybody here at the northern point. There's usually 3 times the amount that we engaged. Instead, what's happened is that it's been spread out across the rest of the other points, so it's going to be a little bit easier for us to engage. So we've regrouped the entire regiment here. We've resupplied, refueled, and now we are going to move over to point facility, which is the point that's in the middle right here of the screen. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to try get all 3 points here. So the point NASA, which was the point north of us that we already captured, point facility, which is the one we are attacking now, and point farm, which is to the left of the screen now. Those are the 250 point operational authority point objectives. So we've moved the recon team into that forest line there. We've got eyes on this mechanized unit here. So we're going to start firing with the mortars. And I'm going to make a pretty big misplay right here. What I'm going to try to do is try to flank around to the north side of the facility and try to approach the position from direct north. The problem is that the enemy already has line of sight. There's actually an extra enemy unit with ATGMs further north of where we are trying to cross. So right here, we get caught in a crossfire. You can see the rockets, the missiles flying in from the point here, as well as from the north side. So I have to make a decision here, and then I just decide, okay, never mind, we'll just approach with what we've got right here, right now, and just go straight to the objective. Calling in more heavy artillery, start suppressing and try to get some kills in whatever infantry units that may be entrenched there. But we're going to take some serious casualties and losses here. It is very important that I do not retreat any of my units at this point, because of the way the game works. When the next phase starts, all of the units that are currently in play and on the board will start the next phase in those positions. So right now we are behind enemy lines. We have already knocked out the first major fortification at the previous point. I want to try to minimize as much of our losses whilst also retaining all of our units in this position for the next phase, so that when the next phase starts, we can continue with our assault from the rear and unhinge and outflank the rest of the points that are further south of this position. So it's very important that we keep them alive and safe. So the supply trucks, the larger unit, is coming in clutch here because we wouldn't be able to do this without them. So most of the units here at the point has been wiped out, so we're going to move one platoon of infantry in to just make sure we clear it out. Because like I said before, an entrenched unit in cover, they have a lot of... it's very hard to detect, so we have to be quite careful, and I'm going to take my time to be very thorough here. The rest of the regiment is now resupplying and repairing. Now the reason why I'm doing it here out in the open is there isn't really any threat. We do know that there is a unit further north that was firing ATGMs at us, but they don't have direct line of sight, and it's most likely an entrenched unit of some kind, so they're not going to be maneuvering to engage us. I've sent my recon unit to the north side of farm here, and he's already lit up these 2 mechanized infantry platoons. So we're going to start hammering away with our off-map artillery and the mortars. Now that the regiment has been resupplied, we're going to maneuver in and approach them from the northeast forest line and then push in. And after that, we're going to continue the assault to the point that's directly next to it, further south, Point Grove, and see if we can get all those points. So far, everything is looking good. I mean, this is as successful a run, if you followed my strategy, that is, of trying to flank from the west in a far flanking maneuver like this. This is as good as it gets. Now, this message that pops up, this happens quite often, and it will happen in all the other scenarios that come after this. Basically, the enemy is now deploying reinforcements that are going to spawn from the deployment points, and they're going to be coming after us. These are the mobile groups that I talked about before. And we will deal with them as they present themselves. We don't need to worry about them, because first of all, we don't really know where they're going. They could either be trying to attack the AI positions on the far right where the objective is, or they're trying to come after us. We don't know. Could be either or. The one thing that I can say with a lot of confidence is that they won't specifically counterattack any of the points that we capture. By that I mean they don't really go after the points with the intent to capture it. They may drive through it, and if the column is long enough or large enough, they will by just the time it takes for all the units to pass through the point, eventually capture it. But that's usually not what they do in this first phase, that is. In the next phase, that's a completely different story. The next phase, when the enemy reinforcements spawn in, they're going to be coming after our points. And yeah, there are big fights that are going to happen there. But for this first phase, for this first scenario, that's usually not how the AI acts. At least in my experience so far. So here we have the 5-minute marker, and you can see the northernmost point is currently being capped. But it's not going to fully cap, and I'm not in any... I'm not panicking or anything here. I know that whatever AI units that are currently there, they're not going to stay and capture it all the way. Which you will see here play out in a few moments. So we've regrouped everybody at farm, deployed the mechanized infantry into the forest on the west side here. I'm going to deploy the tanks to the right of them, and then push into the grove. Now I've got a slight misplay here again. My mortars, I should have kept them on hold fire, because there's no real reason for them to start attacking this anti-air unit right here. Their mortars isn't really going to do anything to it. I mean, sure, it suppresses them, but we don't really need it suppressed at this point in time. We have no air assets available. So we've got the heavy artillery called in again. And here we go. We are now, because I can't actually push the recon unit up this far. I've tried many times before engaging in this area here. Recon just doesn't perform very well at Point Grove. The distances involved are just too short that by the time you are able to identify targets, the enemy can already see you basically. The way the recon units work is they have increased capabilities in detecting units, but they also have increased capabilities of stealth. So long as they're in cover, they get extra bonuses that hide themselves. But the bonuses only take you so far. If you walk right up into somebody, they're going to see you, they're going to detect you, so that's the end of that. Now here's one of the mobile groups that we were talking about earlier, and they're coming after our units here. And at this point, I just had to retreat the mortars straight away, because if I just kept them there and tried to like maneuver them or do some fancy maneuvers away, they would have just been wiped out. So yeah, quite inconvenient. Now the supply truck is out of supplies. At this point in time, I didn't know that, so you'll see me actually try to resupply from it in a few minutes here. But it's important that we do not retreat the supply truck, because like I said before, all the units that are in play at the end of this phase, they stay there for the next phase. And during the interphase after action sort of how do I put it? During the interphase period, let me put it like that, you get the chance to resupply and replenish any of your losses with operational authority. And basically what happens there is that any supply units that are in play, they get some supply back, so that when we start the next phase, we will get extra supplies basically for free. So yeah. Now facility is being flipped here, not because the enemy is trying to get into the point to capture it. It's just because they detected our units here, they came and attacked us through there, so they walked through the point, and now they're trying to go back into attack the AI on the right side. At least that's the way that I've seen it play out. I could be completely wrong, because the last time I played this game was like a year or 2 years ago. It may have changed it, but so far throughout the playthroughs now, because I've already played through this entire stage, it didn't quite look like that to me, that they went straight for the point, especially on this first phase. But yeah, if anybody else knows the exact details regarding it, then please let me know, because that would be very nice to know. So I've already realized here that my supply truck is out of supplies, and I have to make this play here. It's quite risky because all of our units are damaged. One of our mechanized infantry platoons is almost dead. All of the infantry in both platoons has pretty much been wiped out. So we are very low on infantry. But I really want to get this point right here. And this is where I learned something new. You don't necessarily need to capture the whole point in order for it to count. Because what's going to happen here is that we're going to enter the zone a little bit too late. for it to be fully flipped over. But in the after action report, we actually get the points from capturing this zone. And when we start the next phase, we actually have the phase under our control, which I didn't know at the time. So present me, which is going to be talking after this phase is wrapped up, it's going to sound like he's not knowing what he's doing. But yeah, I only realized that after rewatching the footage. So yeah, but overall for this phase, everything here went pretty much according to plan. I mean, it went better than what what I planned and what I expected. This is one of probably the best playthroughs on this difficulty rating that I've had so far. And so yeah, we're just deploying our units in cover because, as I said, when we start the next phase, I want to have us in a good position because we're still behind enemy lines. We want to strike them, continue to strike basically, because it doesn't need to stop there. So here's the after action report, and we've got like a close to 4-to-1 ratio of kills to deaths overall. That includes vehicles as well. So yeah, we did pretty well. I'm very happy with this result. So yeah, I'm gonna let my present me take away the rest of the after action report and the next phase as well. All right, so I am very happy with how that turned out. It's a shame that we lost facility. That was the middle point there at the last second. We were like 3 seconds too late into the capture zone. So it takes like 60 seconds to fully capture a point from an enemy. So that's the time to unflip it and then flip it back, 30 seconds each. But I mean, I got the point that I was most interested in, which was the very furthest back and one of the 50-point points. So, I mean, in all the runs that I've played through, I think this is probably the best that I got. We got pretty lucky with the rolls regarding the enemy forces that were deployed in the furthest back points. Usually they have like far more than what we encountered in the run through. So yeah, that was great. And I got it on tape. Nice. Okay, so as you can see here, we're now rich. um, First things first is just replenish everything that we lost, and our losses compared to other campaigns and other playthroughs that I've run through, these are relatively light. So these numbers here, you get the ability to restore the units that you've lost, and the numbers here indicate how many operational authority that cost. So our costs here are pretty low. We're just gonna buy all that back up. Okay, so now what do we do? I don't really need to get the reinforcement. So I'll talk a little bit about the strats regarding the reinforcement. So these are all fixed, right? So every time you play the campaign, these are the kind of reinforcements that you can bring in. So we have an armored task force, 2 mechanized task force, and a command group. Now, if you hover over each of these task forces on the right-hand screen, you can see that you actually get upgrades to them. So if we were to buy Task Force Stern here, which is an armored task force, we get a platoon of T-55s, which are tanks. They're not as good as our T-72s, but a tank's a tank, right? So we get a platoon of tanks and more artillery, smoke artillery. Now, usually it's not really a good idea to get tac aids, which you already have. I'm Maybe the game's been updated since then. I'm not sure, but usually, well, at least the last time that I played through the game, they become redundant because we already have smoke on our main regiment task force. So not really much point in getting that again, but that's a minor detail, right? You really want the units that you're getting from it. So as you can see here, if we hover over it on the right hand side of the screen, you can see that at level 1 we just get the base T55As. But then we can pay more to upgrade that to get T55 AM2s. And then we can upgrade that again to get a larger platoon of T55 AM2s, but also an extra mechanized mortar group, which the 120s that we already have in our main regiment. So yeah, each of the task forces, they have that. If I take a look at the Apparet mechanized task force, you can see here that the base task force that you buy is just riflemen and BMPs, but then after that you get heavy artillery. So yeah, now out of these four, in my opinion, there's only really two that you really need, especially when you get into the second and third stages, and that is the Tambov Mechanized Task Force and the Command Group. And the reason behind that is because really you don't need any more tanks or infantry, and you don't really need that much artillery either. You're pretty good for what the campaign is going to throw at you. Well, what really helps you out is in the Tambov Mechanized Task Force, what you want is the second level, because that unlocks the assault engineers. And the way assault engineers work in this game is that they are the anti-infantry infantry. All right, they don't only get bonuses for breaking through obstacles or killing entrenched units, but they are just straight up very good at killing infantry, right? So that's the way that the assault engineers work in this game. And we also get another recon platoon of BRMs, which is like an APC version. I'm not entirely sure if it's a BMP chassis. I don't quite think so. It kind of looks like it. So yeah, I think this recon unit is a BMP. So it's got a 73 millimeter gun on it, which is better than the armored class that we have. But yeah, but basically no, you really want to get this one for the assault engineers, but we don't really need it at this point in time. But it's a very powerful unit to have, especially in this first campaign. The second one is the command group. So basically, having a HQ unit gives an aura off that increases all the other units, so they get better stats. This is typical RTS stuff, but you also get more tanks, another platoon of tanks, and you also got get the napalm. Now, I personally have never quite played through this task force on this campaign that much, so I can't really tell you if the napalm is that good. Um, yeah, I usually go for the assault engineers. I mean, it's a cheaper task force, 25, and I like recon because I'm a recon kind of guy. So yeah, that's the task forces that we have available to us here, but I don't think we're going to be getting them just yet. What we will be getting is the extra deployment points. Yeah, that's important. And I think we will get the second one as well. At least that way we can deploy everything. I think we'll be able to even deploy our attack helicopters along with the entire group that we took in the initial attack. Yeah, I'll do that. All right. Looks like we are set. Okay, yes, this is the other thing I need to talk about, the victory point bar counter. So this right here in the top right corner, this is the overall strategic view. What we want to do is to just achieve, well, if you want to win, so-called, quote, unquote, you want to get 170 victory points. That will give you the first victory condition. We're aiming for the maximum amount, which is 230. That will give us a total victory result. Our current counter is up here. We got victory points from the last phase because the AI held those two mission objectives that were worth 25 for each phase. So if we finish this one off, we will get another 50. And then as we continue on through the rest of the campaign, if you can see here on the bottom right, these are the amount of victory points we get for winning the stage, basically the next stage and the last stage. So we're on track to getting the max victory point results. But yeah, that I should have explained that in the previous video, but there you go. There's that. So okay, we are looking good on our regiment. We're looking good on our support stuff. We still have 41 OA, which is a lot better than 0. So yeah, we'll get on to the next phase, which is the last phase for this stage. Go to the events. Um, hmm. I think I'll take this now because I just want to get rid of it. Because in the next phase, I really want to have either of these. Actually, in the next phase, I want the divisional artillery. That would be very, very helpful. Uh, and I don't really need to use the recon now. Yeah, we'll take this. The platoons retreating on their own is going to be pretty tough to go through, but think we'll be all right. Yeah, okay. So let's get at it. Okay, so this is the second phase of the first stage. And as you can see, all of our units are where we left them off, but they've all completely been resupplied, refueled, and rearmed. And our supply truck actually has not the full amount of supplies that it can carry, but it has a decent amount of logistics in it. So we have enough deployment points to call in our attack helicopters along with the entire roster that we initially pulled out in the previous phase. I am splitting up my regiment here, so I'm sending a platoon of tanks and infantry to the northernmost point clearing to the northeast, to capture that and mop it up. The rest of the regiment is going to focus on attacking the southern points here that we need to capture. However, the enemy always has to say in things, so right here we have a mobile group that just spawned in. Our recon unit that's off to the north of farm has already detected them. So you see he's already got line of sight and he's already identified all the units that just spawned at that deployment zone. So yeah, we gotta contend with them now. The priority is still the entrenched enemy units. Those are the ones that are more important to knock out. Because the mobile units, you can run circles around them. They're quite easy to engage and destroy. You just don't want to engage them whilst you engage with an entrenched position. So I make a misplay here. My approach angle on that point was too shallow, so I end up walking into one of the infantry platoons. And over here on the other side, my attack helicopters stray too close to the enemy, and they start taking shots. But that's okay. Maneuvering the tank platoon and infantry into the forest line, trying to keep the distance with the attack helicopters to start getting their ATGMs off. Yeah, we'll do all right. Now the problem here is with the card which we chose, the negative modifier, the enemy side ops. So there's a chance that our units may just retreat on their own accord. And this is going to happen like a couple of times with the attack helicopter. They're going to stray too close to anti-air because I'm not microing too much. Actually here they've already retreated. So yeah, but I think the way it works is that if your ammunition is low and if you're getting a lot of suppression, that's when you get a very higher chance of it to automatically retreat due to the negative card that we picked. But yeah, the attack helicopter already got most of its munitions off, so I'm completely fine with it retreating on its own accord. We defeated that entire mobile battle group that came after us, so there's that. But another mobile group has just spawned in, and we're not going to identify them for some time now. I actually, at this point in time in the game, kind of forgot that there was another group moving about, and we're going to get jumped by them later on. I'm going to have a pretty good fight in a few minutes when we have to counterattack them. But for now, we've dealt with most of the immediate threats, and we can now continue with attacking the points to the south here. So just like before, constantly use the tactical aids, heavy artillery, off-map artillery, just get as much use out of it as we can. We engage this entrenched position over here. Now usually when you engage the point clearing here, the AI units that are further to the right of the screen here, they actually help provide fire support. So you're not all alone in that engagement there. But don't depend too much on it, because they won't move. All the AI just stays. And another point to raise here is that all the points that we captured in the previous phase, when we start this phase, they have garrisons on them. So we have 3 mechanized infantry platoons that are garrisoned, entrenched on all the points that we captured before. So yeah, that's nice, covering our flank and rear. So here we have the second mobile group engaging, coming in from the same deployment point on the same attack angle. attack helicopters are back in action. I moved the recon unit down south, and he's detected the garrisons on this southernmost point, the name of which I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce. The thing about the 120 mortars is that they have pretty good range. Most of the artillery in this game has very good range. By that I mean, compared to other games, especially like Company of Heroes, you don't need to be too concerned with like where the position is, because most RTS games they kind of like limit the ranges so that it makes it for like a good so-called gaming experience. But here the ranges are all pretty much relative to how their actual counterparts are, kind of. Artillery is artillery. You can hit people from really long ways away. It's not like in Company of Heroes where you have like Calliope that can only shoot what he can see. Yeah. So we've redeployed. So I retreated the tank and mechanized infantry platoon that was further up north because of the way the game mechanics were. So talking about realism and gaminess, I'm gaming the system here because when you retreat a platoon, it doesn't need, the models themselves don't need to run all the way back to the deployment zone in order for them to be put back on the force roster to get their replenishment. So by retreating the units that were on the other side of the map, they automatically, well, not automatically, but they will get into the deployment roster faster than if you were to just move them all the way back and then recall them that way. They sort of like, you know, teleport back into the roster, and now I'm able to, after the timer has run out, I'm able to redeploy them now, and because we're attacking the southernmost points, they don't need to go that far. So here what I saw was an opportunity to attack enemy artillery here. I forgot that as a new phase begins, the entrenched enemy positions on the deployment zones, they get replenished. So my attack helicopters, they stray a little bit too close to that entrenched position and they took a couple of hits. But we managed to knock out the enemy artillery, and due to the enemy side ops, they automatically just retreat, which is what I wanted to do anyway because they were running low on ammo. So there's that. So we've killed quite a lot of the entrenched enemy positions at this point here, and now we're pushing forward. We get a little bit unlucky here and we run into an extra mechanized infantry platoon that's further off the point, but our combined units here have more than enough firepower to deal with that. I'm already maneuvering the recon platoon to scout out the last 2 points on our east side here, Hill 90 and Charlie. They're gonna get pretty good identifications on most of the units there, and just like we've played throughout this entire scenario, we're just gonna hit them with the heavy artillery, the off-map artillery, and the 120 mortars. And once they've been softened up, we push in with the mech infantry and the tanks. Now I'm leaving the 2 platoons up north there just because of that large group which popped up, the radio intercept, that there was a platoon of, no, sorry, a group of 5 to 7 platoons that has spawned in, and it's that group that's going to give us some trouble in a few minutes here towards the end game of this phase. But for now, we're just mopping up what we have here, what we can see. So as I said before in the previous phase, the mobile groups here, as far as I can tell, the way that I've observed the AI, is that in this phase here they will go after the points as well as just your units that are on the field. And what's going to happen here is that that northernmost point NASA is going to be fully flipped, and then the enemy column is going to come after us. Actually, they're going to go after point facility first, but you get what I mean. We're also going to have to go back to clearing, because that's going to get capped as well, but we'll deal with that when we get there. So our attack helicopters are back in play. Our recon unit has identified most of the entrenched enemies here. And yeah, we're just engaging them from range. There's nothing they can do from here, really. The anti-air weapons that the mech infantry has, they don't have that much range. So they can't hit our helicopters there. Actually, I'm also pretty sure that they can't identify the helicopters because they got no recon this far south anymore. So we're approaching this position from several angles. We have the mech infantry that's crossing through the forest line to the north there. And we have our tanks off to the left. They're coming forward now. So here we have a good use of the attack helicopters. It's just a shame that it's already out of its main ammunition. But it doesn't matter, it's got enough firepower to knock out the artillery and this tank platoon over there. And there we go. We have pretty much wiped out all of the entrenched enemy positions. And here is where the fun begins. So if you can see up to the top of your screen there, at the northern point, well, that is an enemy armor column. And that is a lot of tanks. And we're going to have quite a few problems because I'm going to misplay my regiment here quite a bit. Basically, we're going to engage them head on, take a ton of casualties, and that will force us to have to retreat, regroup, and then counterattack, being a little bit smarter the next time. So yeah, that's what's coming up here. So the garrison position at Point Facility, they're about to be overwhelmed. There's nothing they can do against that amount of armor. And Facility is going to get capped, I believe. We'll see in a second here. Now, ideally, we want to engage them with our attack helicopter at range. The problem is that most of my units are all out of position. I sent my recon unit to cap Hill 90 because I wanted to just get all the rest of my core combatants grouped up so I can engage this armor column. But that was a mistake because I'm just going to go piecemeal into them and we're going to get cut to pieces. It doesn't help that my attack helicopters are low in ammunition. The supply trucks already started off at a less normal value of supplies, so I've had to retreat them here. So we're gonna have to just fully retreat the attack helicopters. Now what you can do is that you can actually just move them back to the deployment zone on the map, and you can get the supplies that way. But it's a trade-off that you have to make depending on how far on the map that their position is. Is it worth the time to take them all the time to fly all the way back to the deployment zone, or just simply retreat, in which case they fly at full speed to the deployment zone and then get back in faster because they don't necessarily have to travel all the way. They sort of like teleport a little bit. Yeah. So our tank platoon and mech infantry platoon, they got almost wiped out. They didn't get completely wiped out because they're gonna come back with their veterancy values. And yeah, that's gonna be good stuff for us. I'm not sure, have I already touched upon how the veterancy works? But basically, by getting kills, our units get experience points. If you gather enough experience points, you get vet levels, which you can see are the chevrons on the icon. I accidentally hit the escape button there trying to deselect the units. And the veterancy, it gives the unit a bunch of buffs. It gets better negation to suppression, better accuracy, better rate of fire, a whole bunch of stuff. It doesn't increase like damage or anything like that. The base mechanics regarding damage and armor, armor piercing, that's all just normal in the game. The veterancy doesn't affect that, at least to my understanding at this point in time. So I retreat the platoon there because they are out of ammunition. That's one way you can resupply your units quite quickly. Just hit the retreat button, get them all the way back on the force roster, and then redeploy them. I thought that I could take this on here. So basically, with vet units and with certain types of units, especially if it's like assault engineer type units. I know the main Soviet line has a unit like that, and the Americans also have a unit. I'm not entirely sure what they were, but it is possible for a single platoon to take on 3 times its size and win. I've done that before, especially if it's a vet unit against unvet units. It can be done. I have done it before, but this was not one of those situations where it could be done. So I'm trying to focus fire that mech infantry squad. The ATGMs are firing at the tanks, but the moment the mech infantry pops up, we have the artillery, the mortars, and everybody just start firing at them, knock them out. Because that's the only anti-air capability that this armor column has. And once that's been knocked out, my attack helicopters here can just go to town with the remaining tanks. And that's what we're going to do here. So by carefully playing the position a little bit wiser than before, we managed to knock out the numerically superior force, kind of. Because we get to bring our guys back, right? The AI doesn't really do that for the most part. They do have units that get reused, because I do see them come back with veterancy. Oh, I may be wrong. These may be units that have been in the match long enough to have gotten the veterancy. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on that. But for now, because they lack proper anti-air capabilities, I'm just harassing them with the attack helicopter and keep them facing away so that their rear is facing the tank platoon and the mech infantry that are approaching from the south side here. Yeah, and it's basically over at this point. There's nothing they can do. And you can see them just try chase the helicopter even though they don't really have any capability other than their machine guns, I believe, that can shoot them. But they don't do that much damage anyway. And yeah, this was pretty much the last major opposition in this phase here for this stage.
5 minutes remaining.
And all we need to do now is just go back to the points that are further north, recapture them, and it's game over. Yeah. So the way that you can finish the stage or the phase early is if you capture all the points, you get a total domination victory. It doesn't matter what the enemy has on the board and in play. If you capture all the points, you automatically win. And here it's just basically mopping up. We're going to send the recon unit off to the northernmost point. And we do have a few units that we have to contend with at point clearing to the northeast, but it's very, very minor. Nothing to be afraid of. So I redeployed the logi trucks, the supply trucks, back into the field. And what I'm doing here is I'm resupplying the attack helicopters with the logi trucks so that I don't have to fly them all the way back or retreat them. Because remember, when you do retreat them, you still have to wait for that timer for the unit to get back off the force roster. So here, it's a faster way to get them resupplied and still get back into the action quicker. It's an experience kind of thing, trying to judge when you want to get the resupplies or the rearm as fast as possible. You have to judge like the position that the platoon is in relation to your deployment zone, and also to like the state of the platoon itself, whether or not you have any logistics in play. These are all things that you have to calculate in the game, because there's no one solution to all. There's always a situation in which one of these actions is better than the others. So yeah, recon just went off back to the northernmost point. I've sped up the game here to 2 speed because we found a artillery and tank platoon out in the open with no anti-air support, so the attack helicopter just went to town with them. They were all dead. He's fully vetted up now, which is going to be very nice moving into the next stage. And I'm pretty sure most of our core combat units now are all veterans, which is really nice. Usually I take a lot of losses, especially like full wipes of platoons, in which case the veterancy gets wiped out. You have to restart again. But yeah,
Zone
here we go.
captured.
That was the
Total
end.
domination achieved.
Second phase of the first stage, complete victory. And in terms of our kill to death ratio, it's still pretty much kind of close to 4-1. So yeah, I'm very happy with how this whole stage played out. Here's all the after action reports and the kill feeds. So yeah, I will let present me take it away, and that's the end of this phase.